Ici, Radio-Canada. This is Canada.
Radio-Canada, this is Canada. Ici, Radio-Canada, this is Canada. Ici, Radio-Canada, this is Canada.
Hello, radio listeners and film viewers. You are about to participate in a long-distance simulcast. Some of you are sitting in a cinema or screening room right now, while others among you, far away in another part of the world, are perhaps sitting at home or driving in your car, listening to this on the radio at this very moment. You have showed up to see, or tuned in to listen to, Spectres of Shortwave, Ombre des Ondes Courtes. This is both a film and a radio documentary about the Radio-Canada International Shortwave Transmission Site. For those of you in the cinema right now, you may note that you will not see any faces or people talking in this film. Remember, this is a film about radio, so you are essentially listening to a radio documentary, which is accompanied by images of the RCI transmission site from which so many programs were once broadcast. For those of you tuning in and listening on the radio, you will note that while the first hour and a half are filled with stories, the last half hour has no human voices at all. The soundscape you will hear is a composition that was built from recordings that I made by placing contact microphones on the RCI radio towers themselves in 2013, when the site was inactive. Contact microphones turn tactile vibrations of the things they touch into sound. Each tower has its own vibration and its own sounds. Throughout the entire film and radio piece, you will hear these contact microphone recordings in the soundtrack. Sometimes they will be mechanical sounds of loose wires or bolts banging on metal. Other times, they will be more subtle drones and hums. These are the voices of the towers. In the last half hour of the piece, there are no more human voices, while the site is slowly demolished in winter. In this final section, all of the drones you hear are recordings of the towers, and each time a tower falls on the frozen marsh, its recording, or its voice, is first amplified like a dying breath, and then removed from the soundtrack completely. One by one, the drones of the towers will be removed, until you can only hear the single sound of the last one standing. If you are in a cinema or screening room right now, know that there are people very far away in another part of the world listening to the same thing you are, but doing so from their home or their car and picturing the images in the cinema of their mind's eye. For those of you tuning in on the radio, know that there are people gathered together in a large room far away on another part of the planet, having a very different experience of the same thing at the same time. And so relax, and for the next 2 hours, I wish you a good simulcast. May the projection be bright, and may your reception be clear.
Il y a de magnifiques tours illuminées le soir.
Shortwave
when they turned their hot water tap on, they would get the sound of the radio coming out of their faucet, which I think is amazing.
The sounds were not necessarily clear, but they were clearly voices.
The bridges singing.
Les canaux d'irrigation que les Acadiens ont construits.
I can tell you that some of the supply voltages are on the order of 14,000 volts.
You're not used to getting
it starts gradually.
When I told him that I was dreaming the other night that I didn't know.
Les autres groupes de Radio-Canada couvrent la moitié du globe.
And here I am on the other side of the world, connected.
Well, it was quite exciting. This was the first tower that went up was for CBA, and it was I think 480 feet. They broadcast almost all over the world. Well, it was kind of a fun place to work. There was always music, and whatever program was on, you heard it. I'm 98 years old. I went to work for the CBC in 1946, and I married one of the operators in 1950. And I know he came home one day with an RF burn on his hand because he was doing something out at one of the switch boxes out underneath the towers. So it was hazardous. One of the things that you had to do when you were acting as a guide to take people through the plant was to hold a fluorescent light in front of the transmitter and it would light up. So that just went to show what the radiation was. It was interesting that so many of them died of cancer, whether it was brought on by radiation from the transmitter. Who's to know? There was a farm opposite the radio station, and I often wondered how these people, if they were exposed to the radiation as well. But I don't know about the cows, if they kept on giving milk that wasn't radioactive.
The site at Sackville was chosen because of the ground characteristics for shortwave broadcast. The salt marsh created an excellent place to broadcast from, and we broadcast to a number of locations around the world. The primary locations were in Africa. When it was first set up, the site, we broadcast to Germany, to Asia, and after a period of time, we started broadcasting to the U.S., to Central America, to South America. And I think for a period of time in the past, we broadcast to Australia. Basically, we could broadcast anywhere we wanted to the world just by selecting the antenna and the amount of power and the frequency that we used.
I lived in Kuala Lumpur for a year, and Kuala Lumpur is exactly on the opposite side of the world from where I was living at the time, which was in Calgary. So 12 hours away. So when I would get up 6 o'clock in the morning in Kuala Lumpur, turn on my shortwave radio to CBC, and here's my old friend Bob Oxley reading the 6 p.m. news, 6 a.m. for me in Southeast Asia, 6 p.m. in Canada. And the marvel of feeling that I was there on the other side of the world, and I had a strange feeling of, I got my arms around this world. I know what things are going on here. And there was just a sense of some amazing connection with CBC, back to Canada, and with the marvel of being so far away and yet feeling so close to what was still going on here. I just get a little warm spot in my chest as I think of that experience in that time.
Mais c'est surtout les nouvelles internationales, hein. C'est les nouvelles du Canada à travers le monde. Pour montrer aux auditeurs qu'est-ce qui se passe au Canada, quelle sorte de culture on a, où est-ce qu'on se tient au niveau de l'international et de notre réputation dans les différentes nations du monde et ainsi de suite. On veut faire connaître par les ondes courtes le Canada tel qu'il est.
I used to listen to the shortwave radios when I was a little boy. My father was in the military, and we were out posted in Germany, Baden-Baden. And I remember as a little boy, my parents would turn on shortwave radio and listen to the news and stuff like that from Canada, and the hockey game and stuff like that, and the scores or what have you. And when I was in the military, we used to listen to shortwave radio as well. And so it was always a way of catching up on what's happening back home, and listen to news, even if you're out in the middle of a bush and there's no way of catching a television signal or anything like that remotely similar, or no internet.
Everybody can afford shortwave. We only got, 30%, 40% of our world that's on computers?
A lot of remote areas and a lot of poor areas in the world that, they don't have internet up there. They don't have computers. They can't plug into a tree. But a shortwave radio, especially the wind-up ones, those were ingenious. I mean, they were like a $20 radio. You get this thing, you crank, wind it up, and then suddenly you're connected to the planet.
You can buy a shortwave radio at Radio Shack, and it was the size of a pack of cigarettes, and you can put it in your pocket and take it with you wherever you go. And so, even though you can't get an FM or AM radio station anywhere near you, you can always listen to shortwave and find out what's going on,
Shortwave's not something you can block. It's not like, on the internet where you can control news in your own country. Shortwave radio, if you got a radio, you can pick it up. No way to block it.
I was up in the North Pole for 6 months. But being up north, you always seem to be able to pick up somebody's transmission shortwave. So you was able to listen to different broadcasts in different countries and stuff like that. Depends who was telling the news and who was involved. If it was an outside country and they were just reporting the news that something happened, they would tell it as it is. They just say, this is what happened, this is what we saw, this is what witnesses' accounts were, and so forth. If a country was involved and they had to broadcast the news, they would always filter the news to eliminate certain content that might make them look in a bad light. So it was interesting sometimes listening to the same news story from two different points of view, because one will say something and the other one won't.
I guess just after the end of World War II, with the Cold War going on, so it was important that they be able to cover Europe and North Africa with its programs.
C'est au-delà de la programmation canadienne qui était émise par Radio-Canada International. On utilisait la puissance de ces tours-là. Je pense aussi que c'est plus documenté par rapport à Radio Libre Europe qu'on l'émettait. Et c'était un des seuls endroits au monde, effectivement, où on était capable d'envoyer ce signal-là pour qu'il puisse dépasser le mur de fer et pouvait se rendre sans se faire embrouiller, en fait, par les gouvernements sous l'égide du régime communiste. Et donc, les gens du côté de l'Est pouvaient entendre la programmation de Radio Libre Europe. Donc, les gens sont convaincus que ça joue un rôle dans la sensibilisation des gens aux droits et libertés, aux droits fondamentaux auxquels ils n'avaient plus le droit dans le régime totalitaire.
The salt content in the marshes acts like a ground plane, and what the ground plane does is makes the antennas look as if they're twice as tall, almost as if there was an invisible antenna buried in the ground.
Well, the salt in the ground that was over many hundreds of years, the tide bringing it in, because it is a tidal zone, we got salt water into the ground. It created a ground plane in and of itself that the shortwave power basically launched itself off of this ground wave. And just as an analogy, if you will, an ordinary AM site that you listen to in your car, when they build a site, they build a tower, but around the tower they put radios, copper wire in the ground to create this ground plane. In a salt marsh condition like we were in Sackville, this was already there due to the salt, so it was there for us. And we could take advantage of that without having to bury ground cables to create this ground plane underneath the towers.
A lot of times you can get sweetgrass out in the marshes too, right? Because sweetgrass grows in saltwater marshes, and that's a saltwater basin that comes up both sides.
There's sweetgrass all over here. And we use that because in our ceremonies, that is a braid of Mother Earth. We pick it and we braid it. The 6th district, Sigadee is from here to Cape Tormentine. That is, of course, that's our hunting areas and our camping grounds. This was a hunting area, not another thing. It was a habitat for the Mi'kmaq and also for Fort Beauséjour. Now, Fort Beauséjour had the natives on their side, and the English were on the other side. They were at Fort Lawrence. That's all native land. Our sustenance for life was there. Our fishing was there. Our hunting. In that area there, I imagine a long time ago, right there where the tower was, you probably couldn't sleep at night because it was loaded with, before they put the dikes and stuff there, with waterfowl.
When the water comes up in, because it wraps in this way and it wraps in around the towers too, and then a lot of people fish, all the way in around it, and they also get what they call like marsh greens. It's a vegetable that they can get. They harvest it right along that little river too. You'll see them parked alongside the highway, and they'll be harvesting this little green.
Je vois l'évolution de l'humain. Je vois au-devant donc les marais que les Acadiens ont endigués pour leur subsistance. C'était à l'époque, l'agriculture était leur subsistance et on en voit les tracés dans les marais qui restent. Et ces antennes qui sont peut-être pas la subsistance, mais qui sont la réalité d'après-guerre. La réalité qu'on a voulu développer la communication pour assurer que le Canada et les intérêts du Canada et la culture du Canada soient reconnus mondialement. Et aussi, j'imagine, pour une question sécuritaire, aussi, les antennes ont été installées aussi pour assurer une sécurité au niveau pendant la Deuxième Guerre mondiale. J'imagine, c'était important d'avoir un réseau de communication, de diffusion d'informations.
My experience with the radio waves begins with a dream that I was having one night. It wasn't an abnormal dream, but it had a sort of heightened reality to it. It was such an intense dream that I searched night after night for another type of dream like this, because I thought maybe I was evolving into another state of mind, or something I ate that day. So I tried to remember what I ate that day, little things like that, how much water I had, or if I was at a dehydrated point. It was an ongoing scientific study that I carried out for a while, and a while most likely being 2 to 3 days. Now, this sort of intense dream didn't occur until probably about, or more specifically, about 13 to 14 days later, at which point it was during an afternoon nap instead of a nighttime sort of dream. So it was a different state. I wasn't in my bed. I was comfortable, but sort of on my couch. Well, not sort of, like completely on my couch. And started having another intensely vivid dream where I was speaking perfectly coherently in another language, which I assume was Mandarin or Cantonese. I don't know either language, I can't say for sure. But I had no idea what was going on. So I went to the phone book and looked up the number for the RCI towers that are located in our fine town of Sackville here, or just on the outskirts of town, but I think still within town limits because it's before Outlock, but I don't know exactly where the boundary ends. And found the number there. Got somebody. I was very excited because I didn't expect that anything would really come about this, that or something with a bunch of other options to use on your touch-tone phone, which was worrying me because I was using a rotary phone because that's all I had. So I had already set myself up for ultimate despair on that nothing kind of phone call. But it was answered by a human, which was lovely. I can't remember his name right now, but he was a wonderful person and seemed very willing to talk when I told him that I was dreaming in another language that I didn't know. And I was wondering if it was the RCI towers had affected my dream. And he had asked where I live in town. So I described the location I just gave him the street name actually. And he automatically knew that I lived right by a transformer station in town. So he had told me that I would most likely be experiencing this type of sensation because of my house proximity to the power station nearby, or a transformer station rather, during my hypnagogic state of existence, which I had never heard of before, but he described to me it was just in between dreaming and awake, and that I would sort of maybe hear sounds or experience life through a certain Pink Floyd album. Well, he just said a Pink Floyd album. And I said, what, pray tell, would be the Pink Floyd album, and he mentioned that it would be most akin to, say, the Uma Guma album, which is a lesser-known album. Mostly it's just Pink Floyd fans that know the album, but so I was quite impressed with his knowledge of Pink Floyd and his ability to describe it to me in such a perfect way without any visual representation or any previous conversation we'd ever had based on music specifically. So that was a very nice thing. And he also told me that these occurrences happen in town to other people who give him similar phone calls. Like during a certain period when they flip, I think he was mentioning they reverse possibly the polarity of one of the towers, because I believe there's 13 of them across in their sort of web of attraction.